QuizCom's been around for many years now. I think we started in 2005. We have many products for SharePoint on premises, for SharePoint Online. We had full trust solutions, we still do. We have SharePoint Online hosted applications, we have provider hosted applications, and obviously when SPFx came out, we saw that as a huge opportunity to finally have a very good framework for building web parts for SharePoint Online. And this is what we're going to focus on today. Data View Plus is actually a web part, a set of web parts built on SPFx for SharePoint Online. Here's a little bit of information about the company. We're located in Toronto, that's in Canada. And like I said, we've been around and we have lots of products, and this will be a modern adaptation for some of our existing on-premises products, some of the more successful web parts and viewers that we had there. So that's my contact information in case you need to reach out to me. Feel free to email me if you have any questions regarding customization of this web part, which I didn't cover in this presentation. So the topics I want to cover today are basically, I'll just explain what is the Data View Plus, why do we call it Data View Plus, where do you get the name from, how is it built, how does it work, and then also show you a few demos pertaining to the data sources, the layouts, and how can you customize those layouts and data sources. So Data View Plus is basically a web part that's built on SPFx, as I mentioned before. It's using Knockout as its binding engine, and Knockout is very, very flexible where it comes to templates. Now, I know the recommendation, and I say that all the time, if you're building something in SPFx, you should probably use React, right? You have the most available tools and controls for you when you're using React, and that's what the SharePoint team is using themselves, so you can't go wrong with going with React. The reason we chose going with Knockout, and you'll see that later on in the presentation, is because we wanted to keep it dynamic to the point that not only do I give you controls that you can, within whatever properties I expose to you, you can customize and make them look and feel different, but you can also provide your own templates from scratch in HTML, Knockout templates to render the content the way that you want it to go. So the way it works is Data View Plus, and I can call it DVP moving forward. So DVP is a web part that has a set of data sources. Then you set your data type that you're expecting to get from that data source, and then you match that with a template to render and control to render your content, and we'll see that how in action, and we'll see how the data type and data source work together to let you basically know which controls will fit into what you're trying to show. So we got around 10 container controls, 10 content controls, 5 container controls. What I mean by that is, if you imagine like a paging control or search control, these are containers that basically don't display content. They go either above or below your content. Tabs control is a container control because it split your data into tabs. And then we have content controls that go inside the container controls, and they actually display the data based on the template you want. Now, because there's a huge amount of controls and options and data sources, we split them down into sub-products and sub-controls, so you don't have to buy everything if you only want to show an organization chart or a calendar view. You don't have to buy the entire suite of controls and data sources. So the container controls can basically contain more container controls inside of them. Each one of them is serving one specific purpose. For example, I can have a tab control, and then inside a tab control, I can have another group control or another tab control that's grouping the items based on a different column, and inside of there, I can put a paging control and so on and so forth. But eventually down the line, one of the container controls will have to have a content control. The content control display the data, and they change based on the data type that you have. So if you want to have an organization chart, you're going to have to, your data source is going to have to expose a calendar item data type. Or if you want to use, an organization person type. If you want to use a calendar control, you're going to have to use a calendar item type. If you want to show an image rotator or a slideshow, you're going to have to expose an image data source to the content that you're displaying. Now, there are lots of customizations you can do into container controls and on the content controls, which I'll show you in a moment. The important thing to remember is that all the bindings that I allow you to do are done in Knockout, and I'll show a few of the options here. But you can basically go to read about it under Knockout.js on their website, and then you can see how can you apply custom formatting, different font types, apply different CSS based on different rules. And you can write that yourself, or you can use whatever we gave you out of the box using our designer, so you don't have to write code with everything that you want to do. But you do have the ability to do that in order to get more control over the output. So let me just show you on our playground page just what am I talking about, what is the Data View Plus. So I'll do a quick run through and then I'll show more specific demos. So the Data View Plus web part is basically the mother of all web parts. It has all the controls, all the data sources, and all the data types. It can do everything. That's why I'm going to start with this and then I'm going to break it down for you. So the first thing is your data source type that you want to connect to. You can connect to Excel, Graph API, SharePoint list, a collection of SharePoint lists which are read live using the API, or if you have a huge aggregation, you can just use search to get all your items faster. Let's just go with a simple SharePoint list connector, and let's use the tasks just as a simple demo. So as soon as I connect to that data source, I can set my items limit, I can set caching to it. The important thing to understand about caching is not everything gets cached. So only request that takes multiple requests to complete, only data sources that take multiple requests to complete and take a long time to collect will be cached and saved on the client cache on your local computer. And you can limit when do you want that cache to purge. And I'll show you how it works later on when I select a different data source. This is what you get when you just connect to a data source. This is the Data View Plus default template, which is just a list template surrounded by a paging control and a menu bar that gives me a few actions. Now the next tab, which you don't always have, allows you to select the data type that you want to connect to. So right now I'm connecting to a generic item. Providing a generic item to my content. So I can only use a table or a list content control or a custom control, obviously, which can display everything. But if I'm going to select, let's choose a simple one, a picture. And this is not a picture data source, but just so you'll see, right now I can select a camera, slideshow, photo pile, picture gallery. So the content controls that I can select change based on my item data type. We'll see that further on when we're doing other demos. So that's it for the configuration of the web part data source. And now let's see what we have here in the web part itself. So as I mentioned, we have container controls. Right here we have a menu bar and a paging container control. And inside the paging container control, there's a list control. I can switch that into a table control. And now I'll render as a table, or I can use a custom control to write my own template. Each one of those controls have its own configuration panel. So if I'll go to the menu bar of the configuration panel or designer, you can see that I set up a header here, hello demo. And the small title is currently bound into the source title. So I can see that there's an edit formula everywhere I go here. So this is basically, I can either write text here or a knockout binding expression. Let's go to the subtitle. For example, I'll click on the edit formula and you'll see that you can either have component snippets like show me how many items are selected or hide if nothing's selected. And it'll just give me something here, a snippet right here that'll just not show anything if there's nothing selected. Or the data source title, which is another snippet. There's item columns, Right now I'm on a group, I'm on a container control, I don't have an item context. So if I'm going to try to display, let's say, the item category, I'll get nothing, right? It'll be a binary error because I'm not in that kind of context. But later on, if I do the same under the list control or the table control, the item columns will work. And there are also other item snippets, like get me the title of the item, the display item URL, the list title, and all sorts of other information that's available to you. Now, the nice thing about that is based on your data type and data source, all the columns and information that you can use should be available right here. So you don't have to guess or remember what's the internal name for the related items or column or any other column, right? It's just a matter of using that from the menu, and I'll show you how it works immediately. So that's the binding for the top part. Let me get rid of that binding error, and then I have my control itself. So my control right now is a menu bar. You can configure the menu bar with some top actions. Right now I have no label on the select all. Export, no label as well, just an icon. Delete selected items. You can see it's disabled automatically. I'll go over that in a sec. And then there's bottom actions, new item. And I can customize each and every one of those. For example, the new item would be easy to show. Just clicking on it, and I can write the code here. And you can see that I can use the root, the current item, the container that I'm in. I have a few snippets as well. Item actions call a phone number. I'll give him the name of the field. And there's a few snippets here I can use. Or some global actions that can run on a higher level. Let's say on the menu bar, I would use the global actions because I don't have an item context. So delete all the selected items and stuff like that. Now there's a little bit of help in here, so I can choose the icon, tooltip, and there's some help in here. I'll tell you that you're getting 3 parameters into your script. One of them is called root, component, and item. So the root has the item collection and selected item count and so on and so forth. The component will have the current items collection. So if I'm right now inside, let's say, a paging control, and I'm using the component items, I'm only getting the 5 items that are inside that component. If I want to get all items, I'm going to use root.items, then it gives me all items. So this is basic knockout bindings, which we wrapped it nicely for you so you can explore and work with them without having to write everything from scratch. Now there's also a parameter called item, which if I'm inside a table, for example, I can use the item. If I'm inside a container control, then basically the item will return the container control itself and not the item, because I don't have an item in that level. So this is the action editor right here. Let me just quickly show you the table editor, just so you'll see how a content control looks like. I can select what happens on an on-click, wrap text, and as well configure these actions right here. Let's say I don't want to have action number 1. I can just get rid of it. Yeah, hide it. I don't want this action, or I can write whatever code I want to happen here instead. Okay, so right now we only have 3 actions, for example. I'll get over more options in details later on. The one other things you can look at is, right now I'm getting 20 items. I have a paging control that shows only 5 items in a page. I can either delete that control, and just remove it from the middle of the flow. So I'm going to have the menu and the table right under it. And then I can go and wrap my table control with tabs, for example. Let's do that. And right now it's going to go completed, in progress, started, and I can put another paging control inside these tabs. So that's the flow of the Data View Plus. That's all I wanted to show in this demo. So you basically have controls, hierarchy, and you can change whatever controls you want to display in whatever level. Could put a list control right here again, and then I can customize it and customize furthermore what's being displayed in the list control itself. So instead of showing the task name here, I can show something else and bind other data to it. Okay, I want to focus more about the different components we have. So let me go and dig deep into the list web part. So like I said, this is the data view web part. Let me just show you, for example, if I'm going to put a list view web part right here, list view plus, then the list view plus does not have everything that the data view plus have. It only has a list view data source. I can't select a different data source, and I cannot configure a different data type, right? So if I'll put a calendar web part, it'll only have the calendar data sources, only calendar data type. It will not allow me to have other types of aggregation of data. So that's what I mean by subproducts. Okay, let me just get rid of all this right here, and we can go ahead and cover my next demo. So here we have a list view web part, basically. And in this list view web part, there's a few interesting things I want to show you. The first thing is you'll notice the conditional formatting right here on the event date, right? The event date is colored in red. And also you'll notice that we have a special action, show on map. We change the actions right here. So I want to show you how I do that. And also there's a few more options here on the filter control. So first of all, there's an event date. I can either select a date like this, or let's just say that there's anything on 2018 February 1st until, I don't know, June. So there's a range control here that you can use. There's also a slider control for numeric values. So if I open it, it's automatically giving me the maximum and minimum value. Let's say I want anything except for the maximum value. I'm just sliding it over. So these are our built-in filter controls. Yes, you can build your own, but you will have to use the custom controls. You cannot just add a custom designed control into this filter editor. I can show you how you do that later on. Let me close that. And I want to show you how, in this demo, how did we add another action and the conditional formatting right here. So let's click on Edit. And there's a few things to note right here. First of all, you can see that I got 5 items, and automatically when I'm selecting something, this is bound to the global level. So I'll say right now 2 items selected, 1 selected, nothing selected, so I chose to show the number of items. I will go to my list control, click on the gear to go into the designer, and right here at the bottom I can configure this list control. So first of all, I can say that the title is just the title of the item. The subtitle would be taking place at, and then the city, the column value of the city. So you see it says taking place at Richmond Hill. You can have anything you want here. Now, the description is obviously similar to that. Now let's look at the event date. This is the small text right here. So here we did something interesting. It's not only the text that we control, so you see the text will be event date and the value of the event date, but we also added a little bit of conditional formatting using the knockout binding, so you can knock out either to CSS if you want to add a class, or in this case we just said we want to change the style, the color, and then there's a condition. If the event date is a column, every column, if I just call it by name, like city, I'll get the text. And then every column have dot raw, which gives me the raw value with the specific data type of that column. So on a numeric column, this will be an integer or a float. On a date column, the dot raw will actually be a date object. So if I want to do comparison on a date, not on a string, I will do dot raw. And if it's less than today, color it red. Otherwise, color it blue. Let's change this to green, just so you'll see how it changes live. As soon as I step out, by the way, everything is live and bound automatically. So as soon as I change out, you can see that in the background I can already see my changes. This is how we do that conditional formatting and binding in one place. So there's a lot more you can do here. You can control the visibility, control the width, control the CSS. of that specific element. A lot you can do that's getting bound into that element specifically. If you just want to do the text, it's very simple. You just keep to the text itself. Now, as for the actions, didn't mean to close the designer yet. As for the actions, you'll see that I have the view item, I'll have the email item, which are the built-in ones, and then there are two custom ones. Let's click on this number 3 action. In a list control, by the way, there's no text next to the buttons. It's only icons. That's why they're predefined 1, 2, 3, 4. You cannot edit their names, just in case anybody was wondering. So right here, there's a lot of code in it. By the way, that code, that sample code will be available right here. Sorry, item actions, show city in maps. And this will tell you basically that it depends on the column city. See, right now we're looking for the value item.city and item.city.text. We will get that. If we do not have a city column, we will try to get the item title. Obviously, in your scenario, let's say you don't have a city, you have, I don't know, let's say that you have or item dot location. Let's say you call it location. You can just type the name here and it'll work with that field. That's why we put it up here at the top for the demo. So it'll be easy for you to change. So this one's gonna look at the city column, get its value, and then do some magic to open a pop-up, which is not very exciting to learn right now. Open a pop-up that shows you that city in Google Maps, right? So all this code, like I said, it is in the snippet right here that you can reuse, but you can write whatever code you want in here. The important thing is, how do I change the type of the action, the icon, how do I get values from the item, and how do I get my code to run based on that context. So right now, if this one is in Richmond Hill, and I'm gonna click on the map icon, you see it opens a pop-up and shows us Richmond Hill on Google Maps. There's also a call phone number action that we added here, which is doing something similar as well. So these are the interesting things to see on this demo of the list data source. Just in case you're wondering, this list data source is connected. Oh, it's actually an aggregator data source. It's connected to a list called event budget requests, and then it's collecting information from several lists. I will show you how to manage these data sources in a second. Okay. If there's no questions, I can move on to my other demo. This demo focuses on the aggregator data sources more. Yeah, I don't want to keep my changes. Thank you. Okay, my next demo would be the aggregator. The aggregator is basically very similar to the list web part, but the aggregator data source allows you to actually not just connect to a single list, but to collect information from several lists across several site collections and display them in one web part. And the aggregator web part also comes with the search data source. So it has a search-based data source or an API search data source, which I will show you both. Okay, so the interesting things to see in this demo right now are this. I want to show you the selection, the way the selection works. So right here I have a label up here that just show you how many items are in the data source completely. And then I could show you inside the groups, each group, how many items are in each specific group. Now look what happens when I'm selecting an item. Right now it says that there's one item selected out of 2. If I'll go here and I'll select a couple more, then you can see that this one says there are 2 items selected out of 797 items. This one has 1 selected out of 2. This has nothing selected. But here in the global context, I have 3 items selected in total. Now this is done thanks to the different contexts that I can get information from. So this part is bound to the root item collection and the root selected item count, whereas this one is bound into the specific control context item count, and then it gets its own, only gets its own selected item count. So let me show you how that's done. And another interesting thing about the tab control, I'm sure you probably know that a category in SharePoint the category field, sorry, the status field actually has a number preceding it, which didn't really look well in this demo. So right now I'm grouping them in tabs based on the priority column, but if I'm looking at an item as it is, you see that the priority says 1 and then high. And I didn't want to show that number 1 right here, just because it's confusing when I'm showing the number of items as well. So let me show you how I did those two things. First of all, on the global level, this is my regular binding text that I want to show you. So basically, you see I'm just running on the root level. I don't have to specify anything else. Show me the selected count, items.length, selected items will all point into the global root level, all items. But if I do the same thing right here on the tabs control, here's the tab text. So the two things that happens here, you see automatically I get the selected count from the current level. Now if I wanted to, I can type in root dot and then it'll give me the total number of selected items, but by default it falls into my context, so you have both options. Now the other part was that I wanted to get the title of the tab, but I wanted it to be to remove the brackets and the numbers. So I'm just calling slice, removing the first 4 letters from it, and that's it. I don't get the preceding number before the priority is going. Okay. Other things that I can do with this. Yeah, I have to set which column will be the title of the tabs, right? So if I'm using title here, how does it know which column to show me? So this is done by this, group by, and I selected the priority column, obviously. That's why it's grouping by priority and it's showing the priority right there. And is there something else I wanted to show here? Let me see if I'm missing anything on my demo. Yeah, okay, so there's another aggregator demo that I want to show you that have multiple item actions. Let me just discard of these changes unless there are any questions. And let's move to the next aggregator demo. So right here I have another aggregator data source, and let me show you a little bit about how it's configured. And then I'll show you something cool about the actions in this web part. So right now it's connected to the aggregator data source. Go to the current site, select this list. This list will only provide the default view and filtering and sorting definitions for my aggregation. So you don't have to write your own query and filters. You can, but you don't have to with this data source. You basically just create a view in one of the lists and point to that one as your main view for the web part. And then you create your data sources. You can add more data sources. Right now I only have one. Sorry. Each data source is limited to a site collection. That's why you're able to add multiple data sources. So you give a data source a friendly name. You can specify the scope, entire site collection, specific site, specific lists. So you can select 1 or 2 lists that you want from that specific site to work with. You can filter based on list item pattern. So anything that contains the word box. Same goes for site. So you can say any site that contains the word project, get only tasks from that specific site, from those specific sites. You can filter based on list types, content types. These are multi-select. And you can set enabled or disabled. So just in case you're playing with a few data sources, it's very easy to turn them on and off in one go instead of deleting them and then creating them again. So that's the data source, the way it's configured. And the nice thing I want to show you about this demo is have a look right here at the show on map action and the delete selected action. So these actions are right now disabled, and as soon as I select a few items, they become enabled. Then I say delete selected. Are you sure you want to delete 3 items? So how do we do that? Also, we're having a little bit of trouble with the Google map. Let's see if this demo works. Yeah, pretty cool. So you see I'm mapping all the selected items in the Google map right now. So how do we do that? Let me show you how we configured those specific actions. Let's go to delete selected. For example, you see that in delete selected, we're calling the component.selectedCount. So right now, if I'm inside a tab, this would only work on the tab item. Or if I'm inside a group, only on, or paging control, only on the items on that specific page. If I want to get all items, I'll have to change this to root. And then I'll get all the selected items. So this just gives me the count to know how many selected items I have. And then inside I can get the items by calling component.selectedItems. Now you'll notice a lot of things here are actually functions. These are not really functions. They don't need to be functions. The reason they are functions is these are what we call, when we're working with knockout bindings, these are observable objects. Try to remember that name. Observable object, it means that it's an object that knockout knows how to refresh its view model if that observable object is being accessed or modified. So the difference is that instead of changing the selected count using component.selectedCount equals 3, for example, instead of doing this, I would call it using a function and send the parameter 3. And if I want to get the value out of the selected count, I call it with no parameter and it gives me the value back. So this is an important thing to know. A lot of times you're trying to bind something into an observable object in Knockout. You think it's a text value and then you get a weird text naming the function content. Basically means that you just have to call it as a function. I'm sorry. Okay, so that's what happens when these are observable functions. Now, how did it get enabled and disabled? Very simple. We recognize if you're calling selected count or selected items, we're automatically recognizing this, and then your function will automatically get disabled if there's nothing selected. So there's a little bit of magic there. There's nothing you have to do. And if you want your function to only work when you have selected items, you just call one of those members out and that'll basically disable it for you automatically. Let me discard my changes right here and I'll just quickly show you the search data source. This is the search data source. For example, here we get 800 items. In the search data source, this data source got us more than 12,000 items. Let me just refresh this so you'll see how it works. So 12,000 items pretty fast, I would say, right? If you click Edit and go to the data source, you'll see how the search data source is configured. So right now it's a search. SharePoint search is the data source instead of a regular aggregator. I can have my query text here, which is currently empty. I'm limiting it by list type and content type. So get me anything that's basically a task. Search documents and lists only. Don't get me people or sites or anything like that. These are the columns I want to bring back. Now we have a great KB article on our website, on our support website. We have a great article there explaining how do you get the search to index other columns. For example, you see that we're getting the priority and the status. You try to do the same thing, it's not going to work. You're going to get empty values. First, you have to go and configure your search to map an existing queryable column into the priority and status columns, so you'll be able to retrieve them using this web part. Just putting this as a side note. If you want to get that link, send me an email. I'll send you a link to that KB. But once you do that, you'll see that your select column, refinable string 02, that's probably my status column, I think. That's one of those columns that we mapped, okay? We call it refinable string number 1, refinable string number 2. This is how you basically map them in your results. And same thing, very similar to the other aggregator, set your search scopes. It's optional here because you can just say search for the word chai everywhere, get me anything that chai is mentioned. If I would have a search query here, sorry, search query text here. But I didn't have a query text, so I had to give him something to know what to bring back. So I gave him the search scope. So search scopes are very similar, but a little bit different. I'm just basically telling my search data source to get all items from a specific site, subsites. Why is the pop-up not opening up? Thank you. From that specific scope and get all items that answer that specific filter. So right here I have this site and subsites, so it's only this site and under, not everywhere. I gave it the URL of the site that I want to start from. I can choose any site on the site collection here, or I can switch to a different site collection right here, and then this drop-down will show me that site collection subsites. Can select a list type if I want to filter it, content type if I want to filter it, and enable or disable. So very similar to the other one, except I'm not starting with a list and a list view. Instead, I have a search, and I can configure a search query. The other thing that you're going to notice is if you're not using a SharePoint list data source, we don't really know what your columns are. So we get only the name of the column. We don't get the title of the column. We don't get the type of the column. I would have no clue that the due date is basically a date column. It'll just be a text column. I won't even know the title of the due date. So how do we handle this? Let's say you connect it to an Excel data source or graph data source, and it comes back and you just have those column names and we don't really know what's inside there. So you'll notice here on the search data source, there's a second page. You can click next, and then I'm configuring the column info. So basically I can add column info if I want to. Adding column info basically shows me everything that got back from the data source, everything that got back from here, rank, URL zone, whatever got back from here, and I can basically say what's the title of this column and what's the data type. So culture is fine, I don't have to give it another title, you can already see that it appears here. But the data type is text, but I can also say that it's a date, time, multiple values if it's a collection, number, yes, no, or a link to an image. Why is that important? You already know why date and number are important, because on the filter, for example, you'll have the date range picker or you'll have a number slider to select, right? Other things that are important, date, time, or date only. Also for display, so I'll be able to format it using your original settings, so that's also helpful to know. Link or image are very helpful for us, so we'll know that you want to render this as actually as a link. So let's just choose something else that will be a link, maybe. Yeah, let's do this, and let's configure this as a link. And now basically it'll take this column value, the doc ID, which is not correct, but it's fine. It'll take this and make it into a hyperlink. So I can actually say that it's a hyperlink or an image. What do I want the end result to produce? And also, I didn't provide any label for the doc ID. So it's going to use the same text as the label for the link. But if I want to, I can basically say, no, use the title of the item as the title for the link instead. So right now it's gonna create a title link using that specific text. All right, let me get rid of that for a second. Get my demo back up and running, and there we go. So other than that, it's the same controls you can use all over the place. The only thing that changes your controls are the data type, which if it's generic, it's only list and table, and the product that you're using. So if you're using Data View Plus, you have the custom control. If you don't use the Data View, and you have all other controls available, if you're not using the Data View Plus, you're limited to only the controls that come with that specific product. Whereas the container controls are always available, all container control are always available for you. Let me discard my changes right here so we can move on to my next demo. Yeah, okay, so this is going fast. Oh, whoops, sorry. So my next demo would be org chart. Organization chart, web parts and data sources are a little bit different. You'll see them right here. This is an organization chart that brings back almost 5,000 employees. We have a mock-up right here. You can see it behaves fairly responsive, but you'll notice that we have the cache right here, okay? This data source is a little larger than the rest, and you'll see, let me just refresh this, you'll see how long it takes to refresh this page. The reason that we have the cache already activated by default, it's noticed that this data source brings back a lot of data and it takes a few seconds to render, so we're trying to cache this and make this a little faster. Another thing that's causing this to load a lot slower is that we do have 5,000 users with 5,000 images for each and every user right here. So if you do have that kind of scenario, this is the response time that you can expect. We have several organization chart controls. This is one of them. This one, for example, have like a person card. You can also email someone, call someone if you'd like. You can color specific people. You see this one's colored yellow. Your screen is not broken. We did that on purpose. This one was colored yellow using custom CSS. So actually there's a CSS file applying to it, but you'll see other controls we can actually apply styling directly without using a CSS or anything like that. I'll show you in a second. Other things that I want to show you here, for example, yeah, I can filter based on show me only people on dev. And okay, oh, sorry. Let me try that again. Department, let's go with IT. And management. Okay, I'm trying to find a filter that'll actually remove a few items. Maybe I have too many tabs open. Let me clear up a little bit on my browser. I'll show you the filter on that one. This might be broken. So here's another organization chart control. It's the same data source. Let me just see if the filter works here. So I can go here, administrator. Or IT. Yeah, okay, so okay, so this is working. You can see, for example, right now I have those people showing up, and if I'm changing the filter to dev, for example, I should have different people applying to that specific department. I guess someone just added people to more departments than the last time I did this demo. So the filter is working, it's just many people are associated with many departments. So that's the filter control. That's the other organization chart control. And you see that this organization chart control allows you to actually apply much more styles to each and every person, not just change their color. I do want to open this one in an edit mode. You know what? We'll do that on the other one. It's going to be a little bit more responsive while we're playing with this. And let me open this right here in the background, just because I want to show the data source, and I want to show you another organization chart. This organization chart, for example, is connected to a SharePoint list. It only has 4 people, so it's a lot easier to play around with. So let me show you the data source right here. SharePoint list, there's a contacts list, and in the contacts list I can customize it and add more columns. For example, if I'm going here to this control and edit, you'll see that I can customize some actions here. And I added a LinkedIn, follow on Twitter, mention on Twitter, open my Facebook account. I added all sorts of things to the employee card. So right now, if I'm going to myself and I'm opening my employee card, you can see that it already got recognized my phone numbers, my email for Skype call or for sending me an email. but also the customized list of actions right here. And if I'll click on the LinkedIn, I should get my LinkedIn page based on whatever's in my profile. So you can supply custom code that does it for you. They're pretty straightforward if you just have the profile name, the username, sorry, the LinkedIn username, and window.open with that specific column. So right now it's the LinkedIn column, and we just do window.open with the LinkedIn column value. Okay, let me show you the other, in this control, when I'm in design mode, I can configure it differently. I can set default orientation and different state, but I can't do much with it. We have the other organization chart control. If I'm switching to that one for a second, and hold on. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't have pictures here. I was waiting for the pictures. This data source doesn't have pictures. It's only the graph, the one that has pictures. So if I'm switching to this one and I'm in design mode, I don't know if you can see, this might be a little slow. Let me zoom in a little bit. Right now I can design this specific person and say that I want that person to be displayed in a frame instead of a square, and I want this person to be orange, and give him a soft rectangle. Sorry, soft rectangle is the default. Let's just do a square, right? This data source doesn't have images, so it doesn't look as good, but it's just a demo. Let me discard my changes and we'll do the same thing over here. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to edit this one. This one has pictures. This one's connected to our Active Directory. It's our demo tenant, and it's connected directly to our Active Directory using the Graph API. So it's not a SharePoint list. And it's getting the user profile, complete user profile with its departments and its pictures and phone number and email. Everything comes back from the server. So I just want to show you how it behaves real quick. There we go. So this one's open already. So right now you can see that the styles are, that they have more effect when you're actually, when you have a picture with it. So many of these themes and styles are just not very friendly when you just have text. So here you go, I'll change this one to a circle, and there we go, the HR admin is now a circle, and I can do that to each and every person that I want to. So yes, it's applied one by one. You can also customly provide rules. They'll do that in one go. Like everyone on the R&D will be green, for example, if you want to. And let me just scroll up a little bit. And I want to show you the data source before I'm moving on to my next demo. So this data source, for example, is a graph data source, Microsoft Graph API. So you see the data source type we selected is a Graph API. We have a few samples here for you. We have more samples, but because I'm in an organization chart web part, I'm only showing you the organization chart samples. We can also connect to a calendar with Graph API. I'll show you that in a minute. Or you can write your own graph path. This is the path, select columns, filter statement. This goes into the filter statement in the request itself. Now, I know how many of you played with the Graph API. The filter on the Graph API is very limited. You can't run any filter on any column that you want. Many of the columns that they have do not support many of the filters that you would need. For example, is null, is empty, is not empty, contains, starts with, ends with. Most of these things just simply don't work. Because they don't work, what we did is we came up with an advanced filter function. Advanced filter function allows you to just write JavaScript, plain JavaScript that gets an item in the context, and returns a Boolean value. So you can basically parse the item locally. For example, here I'm checking if the item department exists, if it's not null, and then I'm returning true. Otherwise, I'll return false, and the item will not be in my end result. So the advanced filter function allows you to tweak specifically the results to the ones you want to show if the filter statement from the Graph API cannot do that for you. So this is very helpful. Another thing that we do with the Graph API is called expanded properties. What's expanded properties? When you go ahead to Graph API and say, get me all the people on that group or all the employees in my company, then you get all the employees. But if you want to do something like organization chart and you want to get the manager ID, you actually have to expand each and every item to get the manager ID and manager name and the photo. So that's a separate request. What we do here is we allow you to say that I want to have an expanded property on each and every item. We don't want 5,000 requests, so don't worry about that. So if you have 5,000 items coming back, we're not running 5,000 items to expand each and every one. What we do is we can bulk up to 200, if I remember the number correctly, up to 200 requests in one go. So we break them down to 200 requests and go and get all the expanded properties for those specific items that got returned. So how do you configure an expanded property? Basically, you give it a name. You say, whatever I get here will go into the manager ID field. I'm creating a new field on the result called manager ID. Then I'm saying this is the path that you expand. Now you'll notice that I'm sending an ID here. There's brackets. You can use any token from the regular item, from the full item. Any token that you want, pass it in here into the request, and then I'm expanding it by getting the ID and display name. Why do I get the ID and display name? Because I want to expand both of them. And we're smart enough to know that if the request is the same, we only call it once. So instead of expanding the ID once going to the manager ID and the display name going to the manager name, I'm expanding both of them in a very similar request, so it's only going to be called once. And then you're saying, how do you extract the value from that expanded property? So whatever I got back in the result, I want you to give me a JavaScript here that will basically return the value that's going to go into the manager ID column. I hope that makes sense. So what I'm saying is this. For every item that I get, make a request to this URL, extract the result.id, get me the ID value of the result, send it back to the manager ID column in the item. So that's what we're doing here. Now you'll notice there's another flag called required. Why do we need that? Imagine the org chart. You're building an org chart. Manager ID, manager name, they're required for you. You cannot build the hierarchy, you cannot display anything before you get the manager ID. But getting the image is not required. A photo of each employee is not very required. It's not critical for you. So if you say that something is not required, we would basically load it, lazy load it later on. So if you're loading the page and it's already in the cache, we're going to bring it to you and going to show it to you already. If it's not in the cache, let's say there's only 200 people images in the cache, but now you have 300 people coming back in the result set, the 200 people that you already have the image in the cache will show you their image. The other 100 will basically lazy load it in the background and tell you when it's done by signaling you right here. You see right here there's a green check mark. This will actually blink orange information bar, and when you open it, you'll say, oh, there's new information that we finished collecting from the server. Click the refresh button to load it. So anything that's not required will be lazy loaded like that and will not delay your web part rendering. So that's the Graph API working with the organization chart. Let me move on to my next demo. So my next demo is a picture gallery. Yeah, the picture gallery, I didn't pre-open them just because I didn't want to kill my browser, which I already did. So we actually have several picture gallery controls. Let me just show you the first one, the slideshow. Just go over it quickly, and then I'll show you the other two. And there's nothing too complicated to talk about right here. So this is the picture gallery control. Obviously, you can configure it with which transitions you want to use, what kind of text do you want to show here, which column do you want to show up there. Let me click edit. You can obviously use the paging control, tabs control, filter control, anything that you want to use to wrap it. Oh, sorry. First of all, let me show you the data source. So it's a SharePoint list data source. Show me all the images in the list. We recognize that this is a list and not a document library, so we ask you to give us a URL column. You will have to provide a URL column right here in order for us to render this. If you are connected to a document library, we would ask you to select a folder, either all items in all folders or a specific folder to show items from there. Data source is pretty straightforward, just a list data source. The difference is here we know it's a picture gallery data type that's expected, so that's what we do there. So similar way right here, camera slideshow, this is how I configure it. I can set whatever transition I want to, what kind of text do I want to show up here, and you can see that this is a full knockout binding, so I can change the color of it, background of it, font size. I can add my own text in addition. I can crop it, the text, substring it, or anything I want to do to play with it. Oh, I do have conditional description, by the way. If I'm opening the formula right here, it says if I do have a description, then show me the description as well. Problem is probably none of the pictures have a description, so it doesn't show anything under there. Although I can actually type it here. No description for this one. And right now, it'll probably show you where the description would go if there was one. Okay, so now I said if there's no description for this picture, put in this text. Otherwise, just put the description of the item itself. Let's quickly discard my changes. And I want to show you the other two controls. Yay, picture gallery. So I put a page here with two controls side by side. This one is photo pile, I think it's called. Obviously you can use whichever one you want. We just put 3 of them out here. They're free controls. You can use them freely. They're not ours. We didn't even change their code. We just put them here as samples for you, how easy it is to get those controls working inside that product. And this is another more calm, I would say, slideshow control that has like a gallery option to it. So obviously when I added this page, and right now if I want to change which controls renders my content, so right now it's a picture gallery. Give it a second to finish loading. So right now it's a picture gallery. If I want to change this, you'll see that I can only select photo pile, picture gallery, camera slideshow, and the default list and table. There's no org chart option. There's no calendar option for me right here. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Let me move on, if there's no questions, to my other demo. Sarah, can you just chime in, let me know that there are that you are hearing me and you're monitoring the chat and there's no questions? Just want to make sure that I'm not losing everyone.
Shai, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you right now. Are there no questions on the chat? I can move on.
Yes, there are actually a couple of questions. There are some questions from Apogee. So the first question is, does it get data into browser but not show to user? So basically Apogee wants to know if he understands it correctly.
Yeah, so when you're making a request to whatever data source it is, your control decides what's being shown to the user, but there's additional information that you can use in code that is not shown to the user, if that was the question. For example, I don't have to show to the user the city of an event, but I can still have an action button that when somebody clicks on it, it'll go and get the value of the city column and open it in the map. Yeah, you have another question, Sarah? Just feel free to stop me while I'm doing the demo.
There is another question regarding picture gallery.
Yep.
So can we have a link to image to navigate? For example, if user clicks on the image and opens the respective URL.
Yeah, you can actually configure this. Let me go to my one-page demo. And you can actually configure a click event on, oh, sorry, I meant the other one. You can actually configure a click event. Most of these controls have that option. Here, let me click edit and I'll show you the options of each one of them. So this slideshow, image title, image card title, and image card description. This one does not allow you to set an on-click. Let's see the photo pile. Oh, sorry, it doesn't allow you, but you can still do that. Let me show you how you do that real quick. So if I still want to have something on click going on right here, I can add it right here in the formula, right? So the title would be this, and I'll have something like a click event function, and I can get any value I want from the item itself right here, item.title or .url, and I can just do alert, or this would be window.open. So this is how you would do that here, and I can decorate this style. I can decorate this with I can decorate this with an underscore that with a so it would look like a link, would look like an actual link. So I can do something like that. I'm not sure if I wrote everything correctly here, but this should work. Yeah, I probably didn't type in the correct text, but that's how you would do that on this control. Let me quickly see the other two controls, go over the settings and see what you can do with them. This one only set the title, so with this one you'll not be able to do that. And picture gallery, let me see. Show gallery, yeah, with this one you'll not be able to do that either. So only with the first one by binding the click event on the title. Yeah, do you have another question?
At this point, no other questions.
Okay, so I'll show you at the end how I use the custom control, and in the custom control you write your own HTML. So you're not relying on my settings right here, but you can do anything you want. You can click anywhere you want and everything should work exactly the way you want it. And I'm getting to that last because it's the most complicated one, and it's important that you know how the product works before we do that. Okay, so I want to show you the calendar plus one, but for that I can't show it on the demo tenant. I actually have to connect to a real Graph API calendar, so I'm going to switch to my own. Let me just refresh this for a second. Sorry for a second. So you see how it's loading right now from the Graph API. I put two web parts here. This one's loading an agenda, and you can switch. Oh, there's no events on these days. One event here, one event here. This actually, when I click next, it's going to the server and reloading the events for me. If I click next here on the month, you see some events are popping in later on. So how did we do that? So first of all, this is the calendar control, and it's really cool because you can actually use, you know, the filter. Oh, I'm on February. Here we go, February filter. You can actually use the date range to filter events live. So you see how everything works together. I can add a tab control above and show items based on their category with tabs, for example, if I wanted to. So all the controls can play really nice together, but let me show you how I configure the data source, because there's something really interesting in this data source. First of all, it's a Graph API data source, and it requires a professional license. That's why it says Pro here. All of it comes with the Data View Plus web part. So this one also comes with the Data View web part, this data source. You can see right now that my examples are the My Calendar. That's it. I don't have the organization chart examples anymore. And if I'm looking at the graph, look at the text right here. Calendar view, start date time, there's a parameter called start. End date time, there's a parameter called end. So there's square bracket parameter. I can also support parameters. You might remember the parameters from the expanded properties right here. Can also use parameters in the Graph API path. What this does is, when I navigate to a different month, it'll take the date range from the control, send it as the start and end parameters, and remake the call to the data source. So this is how we get that lazy loading effect. Now, the reason it's super important, because theoretically I can get all your events on your calendars in maybe half a second of a request. Problem is expanding the recurring events. If you don't give them a date range, you do not get recurring events, because they cannot. If you have a recurring event that reoccurs without an end date, the graph cannot return an unlimited amount of items, right? It cannot return an unlimited amount of instances. So you have to give them a date range if you want to get all your recurring events. The different colors that you see here are the recurring events that I get back. So this is the interesting thing to see on the Graph API calendar connection. If I'll go to the second tab, you'll see that I can configure my column info. So here's the columns that got back from the graph, and I'm basically saying, for example, the start, it's actually a date, and I want you to show me date and time. And if I'll go next, I'm saying it's a calendar type, so give me all the calendar options. Tell me, how do I know if it's an all-day event? How do I know if it's a recurring event? The attendees, oh, sorry, this is wrong. Attendees. How do I know the end date, the start date, categories, the body of each event, and you basically map it to whatever columns you have. Why do we do that? Because you can also connect to to an Excel file with events. You can connect to a SharePoint list with events. It doesn't have to be a SharePoint calendar list. It can be any list that has the mandatory columns. The mandatory are subject and a start date column. Everything else is optional. So you can connect this to a task list and show tasks in a calendar if they have a start and end date, and it'll work. You don't have to have anything more than that. So that's a little bit about the data source. Let me show you something about the controls themselves. Here's an event with a start and end time. You can see the start and end format at a time. And here's an all-day event, a test all-day event. You can see that we recognize that, remove the date, the time part from the date and time. We have a month view, we have the weekly view, there's a daily view. You can configure this control, like for example in here I configured it only to show the day view, nothing else. Actually, I don't even want to show anything else. I don't want the users to be able to choose something, so it's just a daily view. So the control settings are starting view, there's a bunch of them, and which buttons do you want to expose. So in this one I'm not exposing any buttons, and in this one I'm saying that the monthly is the default view, and there's a month, week, day. We have several days views, several week views. There's an annual view, a yearly view that you can also have, and it's just going to show you a nice list. So there are more settings coming to this control. This control was actually just released, I think a couple of weeks ago, and we're adding more and more things to it. Now you can see how long it takes to get all the recurring events on the time span of a whole year, by the way. So this is the lazy loading in action. If I want to just make a request without the time span, not get the recurring events, this will be done in half a second. So this is the annual view right there. Yeah, I was just about to mention, we're adding more properties to this one. This one is actually still under works. It is published in production. As you see it today, this is the production version. But we are adding more stuff, like you can configure the first and last day of the week. We're taking them based on your original settings, translating all the words based on your original settings, and all sorts of other options. Also connecting to multiple calendars at the same time. This, because it uses graph, can also show any graph calendar. So a SharePoint group calendar, a team site calendar, anything that's exposed via the Microsoft Graph API. Sarah, if there's no questions on the Calendar Plus, I'll move to my last demo, the custom control.
No questions at this point. Thanks, Shai.
Okay, perfect. Let me just advance my slides to the custom control. I'm almost done. This is my last demo. Hope you guys hanging in there. And yeah, here we go. This is my last demo of the day. It's a custom control. It's very similar to the one we saw before. The difference is that it's using the custom control right here. And there's a few things I want to focus here on the custom control. So the custom control, first of all, is only available in Data View Plus only. Also, you can do a lot of things. You can control the entire HTML right here. And here's what I've done. The control starts from here, from the select items flag. So this is a menu control, regular menu control, and the custom control starts from here. So the first thing you'll notice is I have this conditional formatting. Anything with the number 1, first priority, it's called the primary system. I added a little message right here and colored them orange. Second thing is I added a few buttons here at the top. Flag to items. This only works on the selected items. Sort by date. Sort by title. I added a label here. Sort by title descending, default sort. Title, title descending, default sort. So I did all this bound data and bound buttons, and I'm manipulating the data. I added a few buttons here, flag and pin, and these buttons change bindable properties on the item, and also they affect the way that the item renders. And they also affect the global scope, which is outside my custom control. And it says there's one selected item, one unseen, and one highlighted. So that's labels I chose to give them. So let me show you how all this magic is done. I'm going to click Edit right here, and you'll see that I have a menu bar control, which we already saw. We don't really need it. I can delete it, and then I'll only have the custom control. Let's do that. There's a paging control, so everything is paged inside, but again, I can get rid of that. I don't have to have the paging control. And then I have a custom control inside. When I go to edit a custom control, oh, sorry, first of all, let me show you that label, 12 items, 0 selected, 0 unseen. Let me show you that item, that label real fast. So that label is written like this, the number of items, and then we have a few flags that you can use. One of the flags that you already saw is the selected. We're using it everywhere. It's something that we use a lot. Selected items, then you get selected count, and you can go through all the selected items that are on that specific scope. But we also have two more flags for you per item. These are bindable properties, bindable through knockout, and you can use them to manipulate the way you render content and your actions. The other one is unseen, and then you get unseen count with it, and highlight, and then you get highlight count with it. These are working on the global scope, not specific to this page, whereas these are working specifically on that page. So if I go here, this only has one item selected in that scope, whereas the global scope will right now have 2 items selected, right, based on the 2 pages. Okay, let me show you the custom control, the way it's configured. So there are no properties on the custom control except of the custom template designer, which is a little small. That's why we can open it in a bigger area. And the things that you can do here is, first of all, you edit your HTML right here. And there's some snippets for you. Give me a simple, for each loop, give me a simple list control. Here, let me just do that up here at the top. Give me a simple for each loop. There's just a div. Data bind for each items. This is how you write a loop in Knockout. And just render a P element with the title for each item. You can see it right here at the back already. So let me get rid of that. As soon as I go out of the HTML, you wait a second, and then it renders with your changes. I also have some templates for buttons. Instead, you want to put, in case you want to put a button and don't want to write it from scratch. And here's my template that I built here for this demo. So there's the flag 1 item. you see that there's a button here and there's a bunch of data binding going on. First of all, the CSS, I'm disabling it. You see, is disabled. I'm going to put the disabled class if the selected count equals 0. That's how you put a conditional CSS class. Click bubble means let me handle the click, don't bubble it up to the parent control. And then on click, I want you to go to the scripts and call the flag selected script. And then there's a binding for the script. This is something you just copy and paste. So remember this, flag selected script. Where is the code for that script? You go to the second tab, and here's flag selected. I can add as many more as I want. I can rename the script. And these are the properties that it gets. It tells me it gets the root component, use root scope. There's another custom property for me here. And I can click here, and here it is. Additional parameters. Do you need an additional parameter? I said yes, use root scope. And here we go. I'm using this, use root scope. Apart from that, I'm getting the regular parameters. Root, component, item, event. I can use all of them. And I'm just basically getting the selected of the item, the selected items for each selected length. And I'm calling the item in that location. And I'm setting the highlight to the state. This is how I'm getting the state, and this is how I'm setting it. So you can do the same for highlight, for flag, for selected, for highlight, and for unseen. So I'm configuring the function right here, adding whatever additional parameters I need if I need them. Here it'll tell me the signature of my function. It'll basically receive the root component, use root scope, item, and event. So if I go to the HTML, you can see that when I call it, I'm passing in my custom parameter right here. So my component, root, and component goes before, custom parameter goes after, and the item and event are automatically added at the end. So that takes care of the click. Then there's the label. You see it's the same kind of data binding for the text for the label that you've seen before. Nothing special here. And here it is in the works for that specific item, selected items, flagging them and not flagging them. Now, sort by date, sort by title, let me show you how I build those two functions. They don't take long. Basically, there's a few built-in things that I can use. Here's the sort by date. I didn't bind anything, I just wrote the text myself. But the click, same thing, click bubble false. And in this one, I'm calling the root context dot sort by column. And I'm binding it, and I'm sending the root and the component. And then I want to say which column do I want to sort by. So I'm sending the modified hard-coded. The other one does the same thing, only sending the title hard-coded. That's it. Nothing else going on right here. You don't have to remember all of this by heart. There's samples of the sort in all those snippets around here. I want to show you the label. The label that I have here for the sorting is simple. It's an H3, and the text is basically a condition. If the sort column, root sort column, is empty, just say it's the default sort or nothing. Otherwise, say sort by and the column name. And if the sort is reversed, then add descending to that label. That's basically it. And that's how this works right here, and you see the item sorts change as well. Let me show you these actions, the item actions themselves. Now, since this is a custom code, I'm actually writing the entire HTML. So I have my div here, my surface here. Each item I want to register its own list page. So you see there's a for each item. So there's going to be a container called list page, and since the data bind for each is right here, it's going to re-render the content per every item in my context. And then I can access the item using the $data if I'm inside a for each loop. So for each item, I'm rendering a cell. This is just the HTML for the Office Fabric UI. You can use whatever HTML you want. I can add functions right here. Here are my actions. Here's one action, and I can get the script and get and bind it to the view item. Component is my binding context. These are the same functions that you see me configuring right here. And you can add your own. Like I said, you don't even have to use that specific HTML. Very quickly, let me delete all that, and I'll put just, I don't know, a list control, a simple list control. This is how it's going to render. A selectable table. This is just, oh, whoops, I put it under. Selectable table, here we go. Regular table, very basic table with a select box. So you can very much control this HTML and put whatever you want inside. Like you see here, right? It's a simple div with a P element inside. So there's nothing, we don't bind and force you to do anything in that specific HTML context. So this is our custom control. It's a very powerful templating tool.